Hello, hello, fellow travelers. Do I have something special planned for you today? I know, when I started this channel, I promised that there would be no hot takes videos available, but this week I just couldn't help myself. Technically, what you are about to witness is not supposed to be a hot takes video, but rather a more or less standard unit analysis piece on a new release or new revealed card for the northern tribes. But as I had the parts available to convert my own contender from what I had left over from my second Winds from the North box, I decided to paint this guy up and then do the video after the card was dropped. We do obviously have a small problem over here. The contender that you see before you is obviously a he-orc with the beard and all, while the card of the contender is a she-orc. I'm going to be trying to cope with this situation by calling the orc that you see in the pictures he, and then when we are discussing the card, I'm going to be referring to the contender as a she. But no matter the pronouns, I'm sure we will be getting through this, and hopefully we can even find some enjoyment out of this and learn something in the process. So let's talk about the newest unnamed character available to the northern tribes, coming to the stores near you next month. Let's talk about the contender. And as is tradition by now, let's start by talking about the backstory and asking the question, who is the contender? We have already covered the northern tribes, or rather the orc tribes command structure earlier in previous videos concerning the Wrathmane and the Wisemane. And as those of you who have either read the book, the Warcrow source book, or who have watched my previous videos already knows, the orc system of leadership is based on the possibility of challenging the current chieftain to a duel, and a victorious challenger, or dare we say contender, is going to assume their position as the Wrathmane, that is the chieftain of the tribe. In the case where the challenge is successful, the old Wrathmane will assume the position of a Wisemane and keep advising the tribe into the future. So in essence, what we have going here is a past, present and future type of situation, and the contender is representing the potential future of the tribe as their potential new leader. Challenging the current Wrathmane is no small feat, so the contenders invariably have to be at their peak physical condition. They have to be extremely skilled veteran warriors, and the backstory would also seem to suggest that the mental decision to gun for the position of leadership will actually trigger physiological and psychological changes within the contender, making them even stronger. But as already previously discussed, the Wrathmanes don't actually discourage or undermine their contenders, but rather they cultivate them by encouraging them to lead smaller bands of orcs into battle, and thus tutoring them for the mantle of leadership should their challenge be successful in the future. This is an extremely practical look at the situation by the Wrathmane, who accepts the fact that should they be defeated, it's not good for the tribe that a novice of leadership who does not understand how to lead is to take charge of the entire tribe, and their future will effectively lie in their hands. At the same time, the Wrathmane is also practical in thinking that should they cultivate a strong challenger who they can then subsequently defeat, that will obviously boost the renown of the Wrathmane, and it'll make the other orcs think twice about challenging them in the near future, which is also a good result from the tribe's perspective. So I really love this dynamic that the Corvuspellis writing team has going for the orcs. So whoever penned this one, good job. Really love the backstory. Okay, and here's the Contender card. As you can see from the high and crisp resolution of the image before you, this is yet another CB provided picture. Hobo was gracious enough to share with us just a week ago all these cards on the Warcrow Discord channel, so I was able to download the cards from there, and I have, as is tradition by now, cut the card into two pieces. First, we'll start by discussing the solo profile of the Contender before we move on to the attached version found on the lower half of the card. As you can see from the points cost of 25, the Contender is a medium cost model. And if I have some worry when it comes to the design of the Northern Tribes, it's the fact that this 25 point range when it comes to characters is becoming greatly saturated at this moment. We have models like the Contender, Lotta, Evoker, Hersir, who are currently costing 25 points, and that means that they are effectively all competing for the same spots when it comes to list building, and we have precious few characters that are way cheaper, such as the Wise Main, or actually not all that many more expensive characters either. So this is a slot in our forces that's becoming quite crowded as we speak. What's further quite familiar looking to us who have played Northern Tribes a bit more or who have watched my previous videos, the Contender only brings a single command token along, and this seems to be another theme of the Northern Tribes forces. All in all, having several characters that only bring one or maybe two command tokens will quickly lead into a situation where the Northern Tribes player is going to have less command tokens to play with, which will impair their ability to win the initiative role and also give them fewer chances to activate command abilities. But then again, our forces do outfight the likes of Hegemony one-on-one, so less of the sneaky stuff and more of the fighty stuff is the menu for the Contender also. The 3-2 movement with a 10 stride charge should be quite familiar to most of us Northern Tribes players at this point. This is what we are beginning to consider, I think, the quote-unquote standard or basic orc movement, which means that the Contender, like her brethren, is a tad slow when maneuvering for a position, but their good or at least decent enough charge range will mean that they will be able to outperform most, for example, hegemony units on the charging distance front, which will give the Contender the chance to initiate the combat on their terms most of the time. Our Contender is packing 4 wounds, which is pretty nice for a 25 point model, and as we are going to be later finding out, she also has a good defensive dice performance to match this high wounds attribute, which means that running the Contender solo is going to be a real possibility, and we don't have to worry about her getting killed instantly when somebody looks at her wrong, so that's pretty great. An orange and a yellow dice with moral value of 2 is that decent to good willpower and moral combination that's also started to get quite common with the orc characters and stronger Northern Tribes units. So what we have in the Contender is a model that's quite capable of passing most of her Severity 1 willpower tests, but then again she does lack the fearless keyword, so intimidating 2 tests and other severity 2 willpower tests might prove to be problematic, if not downright dangerous to the contender. The moral value of 2 means that the contender can endure some stress before having to test for breaking, and it's possible to activate the solo contender a few times per round, but again, she has no innate ability to shed stress, nor does she have a truly high moral value from the get-go. So she isn't the type of piece to go on and activating over and over and over again, but rather she's going to be activating at maximum a few times per round, and that's it. At availability 1, we are going to be enjoying some pleasant symmetry in having a single contender potentially in our forces, a single Wrath main or Wrath main type character like Alborg, and a single Wise main. So 1, 1, and 1 of these different evolutionary stages of a Orc chieftain. All in all, I don't consider the availability of 1 to be a problem when it comes to the contender. Her leadership abilities, her special skills are the types of abilities that don't necessarily benefit from spamming them over and over again in a force. And as already mentioned, the Northern Tribes have access to a plethora of other excellent character models and even some units at this point bracket. So I don't think we would be wanting to field several contenders, even if we're able to, even though the model in itself is excellent. The contender has the keywords that we would probably associate with her even without looking. She's obviously an orc, she's a character, and she can, surprise surprise, join in orc infantry units unless you choose to bring a War Alliance leader in Alborg or Ahlvard, in which case the contender gets the ability to join Varank infantry units also. Her only truly meaningful keyword is raging, and this will mean that the contender is going to be especially dangerous when charging, since she's going to be adding an additional success to her initial attack roll. The contender technically has no conquest value, so she isn't the type of character to take and hold objectives, but as we are going to be seeing, she has the ability to increase her and other units' conquest value for a short period of time in their activations. So take this no conquest value with a grain of salt. Then again, a conquest value 1 character isn't the type of model to take and hold objectives usually either. So this semi conquest 1 that we are going to be seeing isn't that big of a deal on a solo contender anyway. If we then proceed to take a look at the contender's attack and defense breakdowns, we are going to be seeing dice sets and abilities that can best probably be described as straightforward and decently powerful. I have again calculated the average effective attack breakdown on the top there. So on the average, the contender should be producing 4 successes worth of damage when we combine her natural successes and her switch ability that I'm going to be going through next. And she has the theoretical maximum amount of success equivalent damage that she can produce of 6. Obviously, both the average and the maximum go up by 1 if the contender is charging due to her raging ability. So all in all, we can consider the contender to have a high-ish damage output, but interestingly enough, she does not actually have a push modifier, so we can't stress the contender for extra performance at a critical moment. What you see is what you're going to be getting. If we break down that effective damage, we see that most of it comes from average 3, maximum 5 successes, and obviously raging will increase these to 4 and 6 if applicable. The other part of her damage dealing mechanic is a double special switch that will add another success to the roll. And as the contender is providing you with on average 2 successes, that should mean that adding on average another success via this method, and there is theoretical possibility of as many as 5 solid specials, but obviously the 4 is the maximum amount that she can make use of, because you need 2 solid specials to activate this switch. What I find interesting is that some of the Northern Tribes units do have the ability to use a switch to remove blocks from the opponent, which will actually result against unit rolling enough blocks to be removed on equal effect to adding a success to the roll. But such abilities are useless, or at least weaker, against units that don't roll enough blocks to be cancelled by the ability. So the fact that the contender is actually using her switch to add successes instead of removing blocks makes her a tad stronger in these types of situations. The contender does not have the ability to make use of any hollow symbols, so I did not break them down here below. And as already said, we can describe her attack as straightforward and decently powerful. Okay, then let's talk about the contender's defensive dice roll and the switch that she has access to. As you see from the breakdown next to the card, I had to come up with a symbol for effective block equivalents for this roll, since lo and behold, the contender actually has a defensive switch. So we have our first defensively responsible Northern Tribes unit at our hands. So that's really cool. If we start this breakdown from downwards up and start by taking a look at that aforementioned switch, the contender's defensive switch mirrors that of her offensive one, except that it is actually defensive this time around. So for 2 solid specials, the contender can add a single block to the defensive roll, and as her dice are providing her with on average 2 and at maximum 5 special symbols, she should be adding at least 1 block this way, and she can add as many as 2. And actually, if she pushes for additional defensive or counter-attacking performance, the fact that the roll will then incorporate an automatic solid special symbol as well as a red dice that has some chance of providing yet more means that her average amount of solid specials goes up to 3 and the maximum goes to as high as 7, so she has the potential to fish for additional blocks via this switch. Keep in mind 2 important points though when it comes to using this switch. First is the fact that the defender gets to trigger their switches after the attacker. And what this mainly should be important for is that if the opponent is imposing their own switch or ability that is capable of cancelling the contender's defensive blocks, or they are implementing the vulnerable state, for example, the blocks provided by the special symbols should be safe as long as the opponent is unable to remove the dice that contain those specials, since they are technically not blocks until you choose to use the switch after your opponent has resolved theirs. The second important thing to notice is the fact that this switch is not triggerable against ranged attacks and as a result against spells. So the Contender is more defensive in melee than she is against ranged attacks. So if you have the choice of plunging her into melee for safety, you should probably take that, since somebody like Lady Telia can really do a number on your poor Contender should she be given the chance. If we continue the defensive breakdown upwards, we see that the full rainbow of defensive dice, a green, a blue, and a black, provide our Contender with on average 2 block symbols and the theoretical ceiling of 4. When we combine these two methods of providing defensive performance, the block symbols and the double special switch, we get on average a 3 block equivalent and the ceiling of 5, and the ceiling is increased into 6 when using the switch, the push modifier, since the push modifier actually adds a solid special to the roll. But remember that this effective 3 to 5 defense is only available against melee attacks, not against ranged attacks or spells. When it comes to the counter-attacking performance that many of the Northern Tribes units are famous for, the Contender will in melee be able to take advantage of an orange dice that will on average provide a little more than a half a success, and at maximum that 1 success, and it also has the capability of producing those solid special symbols for the defensive switch, which again is only available in melee combat. If the Contender chooses to push, they also get to roll a red dice, which will increase the average counter-attacking damage of the Contender into 2 and provide her with the ceiling of 3. So there is a potential for an opponent attacking our Contender in melee to not only fail to do remarkable damage on her, but also to suffer quite a bloodied nose in response. So the Contender is quite an excellent melee combatant as a result. And that'll lead us to the Contender special abilities, of which there are 2. The first one, titled Defiant Leader, is a longish range command skill with a 15 stride range, and it requires line of sight. When using the Defiant Leader, the Contender imposes 2 effects upon the enemy unit targeted. First, the Contender will impose an automatic vulnerable state upon the enemy, which will help amplify further damage against the said unit. Additionally, the Defiant Leader will impose a Severity 2 willpower test that, if the opponent fails, will force them to either move 5 strides plus obviously their base straight at the Contender or away from the Contender. And this is a really interesting, if unreliable, crowd control effect that the Contender gives you access to. What you can do if you succeed at this willpower part of the Defiant Leader is that you can push opposing units away from objectives, clearing them for you to capture. For example, with your 0 Conquest Contender, an unguarded objective is ripe for taking even for such a character. Or you can potentially push an enemy unit in front of another, hindering their movement if the geometry of the situation allows for this. The fact that you have to push the unit directly away or directly towards the Contender does mean that there is not all that much leeway when it comes to utilizing that ability. But then again, if you choose to use it, you can figure out what's the optimal position where you need to position your contender for the role, so that if you should succeed, you will get the most out of this ability. Another way that this skill can be used is to draw an enemy unit within your charge range. Since you can use the command ability at any point of your activation, you can start by using the Defiant Leader on an enemy unit that's 15 strides away from you, or no more than 15 strides away from you, but that is further than 10 strides away from your unit, for example, so that you cannot charge them from where you stand. Use Defiant Leader on them, pull them 5 plus 2 equals 7 strides towards you, and then charge them and hit them so that it hurts. So this is a way that you can draw out enemy units from their defensive positions into your charge range, and then wipe them out, or at least dent them badly. And obviously this ability is best used against low willpower units. If you target a willpower unit that has a single non-red dice of willpower, you will obviously automatically succeed at this roll. And even units with an orange and a yellow dice, for example, will struggle to consistently pass their willpower roll. As you see, unlike something like the Bulwark's Taunt ability, the Defiant Leader does not actually have any type of softening closure which would allow the opponent to suffer, for example, stress to reroll a dice or anything like this. It's one dice roll, you get it or you don't, and then let's go. You get to push or you get to attract the enemy unit as per the rule. Do note, however, that Defiant Leader is once per round, so you cannot spam this ability like you can, for example, Wrath Roar. I would categorize Defiant Leader all in all as an unreliable yet potentially extremely powerful ability. I would not count on this ability unless the situation is such that I get to target a unit that has no even theoretical chance of passing the willpower roll, but in a situation where no better tool is available, rolling the dice quite literally on the Defiant Leader might be worth it, since the payback that you get from pushing an enemy unit effective 7 strides or drawing them in to get killed can be quite powerful. The second Contender ability is called Orc Commander. I have to confess that when I first read this ability's name, I took it to mean a commander of orcs, but as you are going to see, this actually seems to imply that the ability name is meant to be read as a orc that's a commander, since it can be used on all Northern Tribes units, not just on orc units. Said ability is actually a 15 stride aura, since it's always going to be active and it's going to be affecting all allied units within 15 strides of the orc commander. Remember that distances are measured from the unit's leader, so you need to keep your unit leader within 15 strides of the contender in order to benefit from this aura effect. What the Orc Commander does is that it simply adds a point of conquest to any Northern Tribe unit that inflicts damage upon their activation. And what this essentially means that if you attack an enemy unit that's holding an objective with a equal conquest value unit of your own, and your attacking unit is within range of your contender's or commander ability, as long as you deal at least 1 point of damage, you will be able to gain that extra conquest and take that objective away from the enemy. And this is a really powerful mechanic that can really enable the Northern Tribes force to play this, dare I say, hegemony style of play, where every activation they are able to take the objective from the opponent, forcing the opponent to respond in kind. And as our forces are extremely adept at dealing damage, both on the offensive and even on the defensive, the resulting tug of war over an objective should in many cases favor the Northern Tribes forces in the attrition sense. So this is a really powerful um, strategy or operational concept that the Northern Tribes force can employ if they have an active contender in their ranks. You do need to remember that this ability's effect ceases to work after the activation has ended, so there will be no higher than usual conquest value for your unit for defending the set objective, but rather the opponent can then take it away from you with a higher conquest value unit. But then again, in most instances, when it comes to the tempo of the play, the damage should already be done at this point if your opponent has to again activate to again take an objective that they thought that they could hold against you. The problem with the Orc Commander is that it has only quote-unquote only 15 stride range, which means that you do need to position the contender close by to the objective or objectives that you are planning to use this ability on. So either the solo contender has to use the activations and brave the ranged attacks and even potential charges by the opponent to get into position to leverage this ability, or you need to attach them to a unit that you can then push forward so that you can make use of this ability when and where it counts the most. Phew, we are already more than half an hour into this video and we are just getting to the attached profile, but luckily for your ears and my voice, this should be a rather short and sweet story, since there is precious little special about the contender as an attached model. The contender is an officer type character, so when she is attached to a unit, she counts effectively as an extra model for the said unit, which raises the threshold of how many models worth of casualties does the unit have to suffer before it will see an impairment on its capabilities. And also you can and should in most cases probably keep the contender as the last model of the unit, and if the unit gets wiped out, the contender will then detach from the said unit to fight on their own. The contender does add a natural conquest point to the unit. So if we, for example, attached our contender to a Orc Hunters unit, now we would have a Conquest 2 Hunters unit at our hands. And if the set unit then during their activation deals any damage to your opponent, then you get to the really quite excellent Conquest 3 basic Orc infantry unit that should be able to capture objectives from underneath most enemy units out there. Obviously, capturing and holding objectives is very much the thing for the hegemony of Ember Sig, so these 3 conquest might not be enough against all of their or many of their units even, but despair not, the meta will be shifting when we get access to more and more factions, and I don't think that the rest of the factions are going to be quite so heavy on conquest as our current enemies are. The contender keeps the Defiant Leader and the Orc Commander abilities, and unlike is the case sometimes with the characters when they are attached, these abilities don't actually change at all. So you get the full use out of these skills and abilities regardless of whether you are running the contender solo or as part of a unit. So the decision to attach or not to attach the contender should come down to the way you are planning to move her or her unit and if there's a better unit attachment available and so forth, but you don't have to consider the worsening or losing of any of these abilities when you are choosing how to field your contender, which is pretty great. It gives more agency to the Northern Tribes player to make their own choices and forge their own tactics and strategies going forward. When it comes to the leadership abilities of the contender, when we are strictly speaking just about leading her own squad into battle, she is adding a yellow dice to the unit's willpower, which is good in that this is a dice that can be made use of by any unit. When it comes to units that impose or characters that impose their willpower upon the unit, there may not be a bonus involved when making the attachment, but the contender will always be strengthening the willpower of the unit via that yellow dice. She does also add a point of morale to her unit, which will allow them to endure more stress and potentially activate more often. Do remember, however, that when it comes to morale 2 characters, such as the contender is herself, if she detaches from a unit that is already at full morale, either due to standard movement detach or because the unit gets destroyed around her, she will be at full stress, and this will mean that she won't be able to activate further during that round unless you find a way of reducing set stress, which will obviously involve you using resources to do so. But hey, then again, we are talking about 25-point model that does offer excellent benefits to our forces anyway, so I don't think that's something that we can be crying about as we encamp in the lands of the North Mark. When it comes to adding offense to the attached unit, the contender is pretty straightforward. She will add an automatic success to her unit's attack rolls, as well as a push modifier that will reward the unit with an additional automatic success, as well as a single yellow dice. As you probably know by now, the yellow dice isn't all that great at adding additional solid success symbols, but this dice is quite capable of providing solid specials, and it has some small success or some small chance of providing you with hollow success symbols, which means that some units, especially those units that have powerful innate switches that make use of special symbols and or hollow success symbols, might find this yellow dice to be worth their while. When it comes to defensive modifiers for the attached unit, the contender's defensive capabilities shine through yet again. She's adding an automatic block symbol for the unit, and she also gives a push modifier that's going to be adding a black dice to the roll. This modifier is obviously quite weak. The black dice will only provide an additional block with a 25% chance, but then again, as was the case with the yellow dice, the black dice does provide decently when it comes to solid specials especially, so a unit that has a powerful defensive switch that uses solid specials might decide to push for this black dice anyway. Obviously, when it comes to the attack and the defensive pushes of the contender's attached profile, these do print money when you are attaching her into a unit that already has their own strong, worthwhile push modifiers, and you are effectively getting 2 effects for 1 stress point used. Then again, it's important also to notice that the contender does not add any switches either to the attack or the defense of the unit. So she does impose the opportunity cost of other models that might be able to provide useful switches or other special abilities like Berserker Rage to the attached unit. So we should probably be looking at adding Contender to units that already have powerful special abilities and that can make use of the Contender's vanilla improvements as is, or to a units that don't suffer from the fact that you are choosing to use that unit attachment slot and those 25 points for very basic bonuses. In these types of situations, you are probably looking at a unit that's capable of ferrying the Contender into a position from which to make use of Defiant Leader and or Commander, more than a unit that's looking to get a whole lot of work out of the Contender's own added abilities when it comes to the unit being accompanied. All right, let's finish this thing up with an analysis. The Contender seems like a straightforward fighter piece that has powerful scenario play enabling abilities, and including him will provide the Northern Tribes force with the ability to affect the tempo and flow of the game, potentially disabling some parts of the opponent's game plan and forcing them to pivot to face the problem imposed by the more conquest heavy orc troops that you are able to field. Defiant Leader is going to allow for some situational movement tricks and even some outright assassinations if you are able to draw in an enemy unit or character to get killed, but this ability, as already pointed out, is rather unreliable and it should not be relied on if there are better choices available. Or Commander is probably the bread and butter skill of the Contender, as it'll give a much needed boost to the Northern Tribes units' conquest values. The Contender does offer both offensive and defensive extra performance to a unit that they are joining, and the unit can be used to ferry him into a position from which to use his special abilities, but at the same time the lack of any truly remarkable and special abilities added to the set unit and the fact that the Contender is actually quite capable solo model also means that he can be run as a solo piece without you needing to feel disadvantaged doing so. I think that at the Contender's affordable medium cost and excellent combat and especially scenario play abilities, we should be seeing quite a few Contenders going forward. Phew, that's quite a long analysis piece for all of you watching at home. Sorry, there were probably more mistakes involved in this one than usual. At least you get to hear more of the bling sound when something goes wrong than usual. But I was in a bit of a hurry to get this done. I have this uneasy feeling at my neck that the guys at From the Fog podcast are going to be releasing something really soon, and I want to get this out to the world before they do. So, game, set, and match logbook of a simple Lindworm Traveler. Your move, guys. See you next week, fellow travelers. Bye!